Hi there. This time we're going to look at an old US Navy radio. This interesting box here, as you can maybe tell from the tag here, RCA Victor, type CRV-4290 transmitter receiver. This thing is straight out of the 1930s. Take a look at the panel. The tag, there, get that in center there. Frequency, 45 to 80 megacycles. Weight, 8 pounds. Important, you know. It actually is important. Serial number 1. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Records show they only made 4 of these. They were sort of an experimental model for aircraft in the mid-1930s, probably 33, 34. You can kind of tell that from the number. This has one of the old Bureau of Steam Engineering numbers. The tag here says Bureau of Engineering, so it was sometime in that transition period. But previous to 1932, when they were handing out numbers, assigning numbers rather, there were these strange 3 and 4, sometimes even 2-digit affairs that were just sequential. It wasn't any of this 5-digit business that you see on World War II Navy electronics with classes and this, that, and the other thing. No, it was just, we're starting at 1 and we're ending in, I think the highest I've seen is about 4,600. CRV, that's kind of the same contractor code. RCA Victor. This set was apparently kind of an experimental model to, see what the Navy could do with the, as they called it back then, VHF. Yeah, I suppose it's kind of VHF, low VHF, 45 to 80 megahertz. So, they made 4 of these, put them on some aircraft, and fooled around with them. Apparently they must have been somewhat successful because the Navy did actually open up the low VHF band in the 1930s and the late 30s. Most people might see that in the TBY radios from the Marine Corps, and the TBS radios, talk between ships, of World War II. These all operated in that sort of a lower VHF region. Well, this was apparently the first. Apparently they found it satisfactory enough that they started making some baby step radios into the VHF region with the TBP, which was the predecessor to the TBY. And I think there was a TBQ, although I have no idea whatever happened to that. And then the TBS, which did find quite a bit of use, actually. TBSs were used into the 50s. And, of course, the TBY, which is most famous for the radios that the Windtalkers used. Anyway, let's take a look at this thing. Transmitter receiver. Well, crude as heck. Plate and grid for tuning up. You can see kind of neat geared system there. Kind of, coaxial almost. They're both on the same axle. Filament. You got to adjust your filament. I'm assuming this probably operated off a battery. Maybe even the standard RCA battery box that you see rarely. But they're actually about this size. Very similar construction from the 1930s. Volume. You can see key and mic. Phones. Here's a switch for phone, key, or receive. And then power. Let's take a look inside. Yes, I took the screws off previously because they're a little bit of a pain in the neck. Oh, red. Look at that. Red felt. there is a reason for all this red felt. Sometimes you see it in other military goods from the military sets from the 1930s. Well, especially like the command sets from ARC. Reason for that is actually to isolate parts of the chassis. And you can see here on the lid that I took off, there's even more. It's kind of there to control capacitances and such like that. You want to keep some pieces isolated from the others so stuff doesn't get screwed up. See, if you put this on, ideally, I don't know how well this worked, this cover would not really be part of the circuit, would it? And seeing as how there's all sort of RF goodness happening near the cover, maybe they didn't want to have a big, well, essentially a capacitor plate near all this business. Well, let's take a look inside. Dog bone resistors, 4-pin tube sockets. If you look carefully, you may not be able to see it. Let's see, maybe there, I don't know. UX230, 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 UX230. Bunch of number 30 triodes. It is interesting that they still call them UX. By the early 30s, the prefixes that RCA used were pretty much gone. But, I don't know, they called them UXs. But they're actually 30s. Plain old 30s. You can see the coaxial arrangement happening here. There's some gears up front which are hard to see. Hard to see. But, sure enough, one of those knobs goes to one cap, one goes to the other. You can see sort of a push-pull arrangement happening here. And a couple of adjustable links that go right to the binding posts. Ooh, you see some cracks there. Might have to do a little restoration on this. Now, you may be wondering, well, this looks more transmitter than receiver. Well, that's true. However, when you do throw this switch here, say that's phone, that's transmit, that's key, that's transmit, in the middle is receive, well, it sort of does kind of rearrange all the circuit topography here. And this thing actually does become a very, very crude receiver. I can't imagine this thing worked all that well, but it was probably kind of magic in its day. You know, think about this. This was, what, 1934, 1935 maybe? This was actually out the door and flying. And, wow, that was like super mega zillion frequency back then. The meter's kind of neat. As this here, that's actually a button. You can see the meter has several lugs. The idea is, with this little button, you could get two ranges out of it. So it says volts DC up to 200. Like I said, this was probably a battery set. But I bet you when you push that button, it was for setting the filament. You know, maybe this was, well, actually here, you could see the lower scale is 0 to 4 volts. So if you push the button, you could tweak your filament. That was important. Power comes through a kind of a weird plug. 7-pin with a guide. I've never seen a plug like that. Maybe it was some sort of RCA thing. I don't know. There is some stuff underneath. There's some weight to this. There's some iron in here, some chokes and such like that. Underneath the chassis, not a whole lot to see. It does have, you know, obviously the bottom of the tube sockets, resistors, and such like that. But all the fun RF stuff, all the fun radio stuff is up top. Very nice 1930s construction. So, yeah, this is kind of an interesting little side note in Navy radio history. It perhaps did play a role in getting some of the more well-known sets out the door. I feel lucky that I have this, considering there literally were 4 made. That number comes from a Navy manual. I do not have the manual for this. I may never get the manual for this. But if I do, I'd sure like to see it. Or if anyone has one, I'd sure like to see it. This may have had a Navy model number in the M series, maybe MF. Somehow that rings a bell, but who knows. But the model number, CRV-4280. Late 1930s, or early 1930s number, and clearly early 1930s construction. Interesting stuff. I'll put the screws back on. They're a bit of a pain in the neck to put on, so that's why I took them off before the video. Who wants to see someone take screws apart? If you want to, well, leave a comment and I'll make a video that just shows me unscrewing stuff. I don't know about that, though. But an interesting little set. It'd be nice to, I don't know, fire this up at some point into a dummy load. Kind of illegal to run these days. Just to see what it can do. Anyway, if you like what you see, yeah, leave a like. I'll try and get more of my 1930s and maybe even 1920s military stuff out. Take videos of it. Share it and all that kind of good stuff. All right. Thanks a bunch. See you later.